good afternoon. We got another reaction for you coming today. Park Ranger reveals Mount Rainier's National Park's deepest secrets. We're not going to waste any time. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button, drop a like. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get into this.
Something is going on in Mount Rainier National Park. From missing persons to strange beings beyond our realm of comprehension are being reported in the park every day and then some. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you real stories of real missing people.
We got
and
a Bigfoot.
Eyewitness reports of beings we can't quite explain. But before we get started on today's stories, be sure to go ahead and smack that subscribe button because I'm now releasing storytelling of the mysterious and supernatural every single day. Let's get into it. Sam B. Dubal disappeared on October 9th, 2020 in Mount Rainier National Park in Washington State. At only 33 years old, he was very fit and very adamant about doing this solo hike that he had been so excited to do. And as solo hikes are, it's pretty much expected to be returning the following day because you shouldn't be gone for days on end, at least not with this trail loop. Sam was even spotted that day on the Mother Mountain Trail.
Always go hiking.
He was in good spirits and alive and healthy. But then day turned to night and day turned to night again, and before you know it, no one's heard from Sam at all. And finally, on October 12th of 2020, Sam was officially reported as missing. Mount Rainier is considered one of the most dangerous places to solo hike. And this is due in part for several reasons. Number one is because it has a very high chance of volcanic eruptions, but also the high amount of hiking deaths that have been reported. And you couple that in with misadventures and icy slopes that people fall down and die, foul play, and all the other reasons that people go missing or die.
Always go with
it just makes for a dangerous national park to solo explore by yourself in terms of numbers. But our Samuel was aware of this and had prepped accordingly. He had a cell phone, he had plenty of equipment with him, he had an overnight tent. I mean, this man was not a newbie, he was an experienced solo hiker. In fact, this was not his first solo hiking experience either. So, to many, this was very strange and surprising that Sam would just turn up missing. Mount Rainier at a staggering 14,000 plus foot summit, also known by others as Tacoma, is an extremely large and active stratovolcano in the Cascade Range of the Pacific Northwest. Mount Rainier is actually located within Mount Rainier National Park.
When the last time that
about roughly 60 miles southeast of Seattle. It is the highest mountain in the state of Washington and the Cascade Range alone. Sam Dubal was not an avid hiker, but also an extremely intelligent college graduate, having earned his degree, his PhD, mind you, in medical anthropology from UC Berkeley in 2018, he was a man of logic, reason, and intelligence, and in doing so had even begun to teach at Washington State's Anthropology University Department starting in June of 2020. Everyone he had worked with, from colleagues to students to friends, all claimed he was a very, very intellectual man, quick-witted, smart, and loved the outdoors. The Mount Rainier Park Rangers, who operated in search and rescue for Sam, searched and searched for 9 days without finding any evidence of Sam ever existing on the mountain. There were not only hikers and volunteers searching by foot, but they had helicopters scanning the entire perimeter of the trail he was last seen on, going over subalpine meadows, dense pine forests, rocky terrain, and even around bodies of water, all in search for Sam. At this point, Sam was assumed to be dead. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter the search, winter storms had begun raging through the areas, dropping the temperatures dramatically in the area. And unfortunately, with all these search efforts involved, Sam is still noted as having not been found. Jeremy Foyer had worked as a park ranger in the Mount Rainier National Park in and around 2014. He had lived within the confines of the park, but primarily would stay at the Sunrise Visitor Center on the weekends. During the time of this account, it was around 3:30 in the morning, and Jeremy was driving up kind of a more rockier, mountainous road in very dense fog, and his headlights were able to cut through just enough to where he could see where he was going. Now this night there was very little moonlight and much to see around him, so he's going slow, he's clutching the wheel, trying his best to just navigate his way through this road. And like most other accounts, he sees something that terrifies him. As he's coming around a bend in the mountain road, he catches movement off to his right. And at first he thinks it's a person because it wasn't an animal like how it would be when crouched down on all fours, but more standing up. And as he starts to slow down, he's doing probably roughly about 20-25 miles an hour. He sees this figure stop and get right about to the edge of the road, and he's coming around this bend at the same time. So just out of the dim lighting, he could see a figure, but as his headlights round the bend and begin to shine and partially illuminate this figure, he immediately notices that this was not a person at all, but rather an animal or creature of some sort, and a bipedal one at that. Now, his description of this creature that he saw was that it was no taller than a man, probably roughly maybe around 5'8 to 5'11, because he's about 5'10 himself, and said that it was about his same height. But he said it looked just like a person, just very hairy, and that the head was distinctly that of a German shepherd or similar to a timber wolf. And that as soon as it came to the edge of the road, it stopped, turned its head, and looked directly into his eyes. And immediately, he comes to a complete stop. His mouth is wide
It's like
open.
in
He's staring
Twilight.
at this thing in complete disbelief, with
But
his
it's a
brain
werewolf.
now trying to process. And judging by its appearance, he could immediately tell this was not some person coming down the mountainside in a werewolf costume.
That would
This
be
looked
weird.
far too real, and he could see the muscles rippling underneath its chest and body. And speaking of which, the fur and skin right around the chest and the biceps were very thin, meaning that you could see muscle definition. You could see its chest contract and expand as it took its breath. Even seeing the hot breath in the cold night air, and its eyes glowing this amberish yellow color, looking right at him.
Werewolf.
And as he's staring at this thing, his eyes kind of slowly begin to go down, and he notices at its sides were human hands, or at least human-like hands, where it had 4 fingers and an opposable. They just had long 3 to 4 inch claws at the end of them. But he said if there was ever a living werewolf, that this was it, even though he understands the ridiculous notion claiming that this creature looked similar to a fictitious animal, but that's what it was. Or so he's convinced it was some kind of animal that resembles that. And almost seeming to break his gaze, this thing begins to step forward into his headlights, coming directly at his vehicle. Now, as this is happening, he's still locked in shock, mouth open, and Jeremy also looks and notices that, unlike a dog, which has hocks, this thing has legs just like a man. Knees bent a very specific way.
Any painter
Oh
can
wow.
paint,
Yeah, this
but
man
only
definitely
certified
saw.
painters
He
have
definitely
them.
saw a werewolf. I believe it. I believe it was 100% a werewolf. He saw it. He caught it. It was trying to stay hidden, but he saw it.
Ankles and large feet. And this thing is just casually strolling through right to his vehicle. At this point, Jeremy doesn't know what to do. Not only is he confused, but now he's incredibly frightened, and immediately he goes to look down and put the car in reverse. And as he goes to do that, he feels something hit the car. And immediately he looks up and sees that this thing has now cleared the short distance in a matter of only seconds, and is now putting its hand on the hood of the car, pressing it down, while never ever breaking its gaze into Jeremy's eyes. The way Jeremy interprets this is that it was threatening him, or at least trying to be the alpha one, the dominant one, letting Jeremy know, you're in my territory, you better respect it. And as Jeremy took his foot off the brake pedal and slowly on the gas, his car began to drift down. And as he began going in reverse slowly, but also trying to speed up to get away from this thing, it just stood there as its headlights began to pull further and further back, with this thing just being completely still, before eventually losing all sight of it in the fog as he drove in reverse away. Jeremy at this point begins crying and breaking down because he's terrified, unsure of how to prevail against such a bizarre and terrifying creature. So he's able to regain himself after a couple of moments, realizing that this thing could still be coming toward his vehicle in the fog. And so he decides that he has no other way. He can't just reverse all the way back down this road. He has to put his car in drive and drive a little faster, hoping he won't encounter this thing in which he last saw it standing in the middle of the road right in his way. So he puts the car in drive, braces, and wishes for the best. And he goes a little bit faster this time, and within a couple of 100 yards, he gets to the exact same spot that he had seen this wolf creature at, but it's nowhere to be found. And so he's not even bothering to look around or check his surroundings. He just wants to get off this dirt road so he can go home. Fortunately, Jeremy makes it past without any incident, but as he is now past this point, breathing a sigh of relief that it is over, he notices something in his rearview mirror. So he's driving, now hoping he could see the fog clearing up a bit, so he's hoping he can get down to the road. He sees this thing coming out of the fog, running towards his vehicle, but now on all fours. Jeremy, incredibly frightened by what he's now seeing in his rearview mirror, decides to speed up even more, and after a little ways, he's able to get through the fog as it kind of clears up as he's descending in elevation. This chase only lasted for about 45 or so seconds, never fully catching up to his vehicle, but getting very close. And
It was
just
a
like
werewolf.
that, along with the fog, this thing disappears. And now that
That's
he's
why I
low
dropped
enough
down
in
on all fours
elevation,
and started
he doesn't
running at
see
him.
it anymore. Jeremy was fortunate to be able to make it home safely without any other incident or
It was a
anything
werewolf.
following him or any other
I believe
sightings.
it.
Jeremy would move at the end of 2014 to Pennsylvania, where he continued his career as a park ranger in the Forest Service. And since that night, Jeremy Foyer has not had any other encounters like this. Matthew Bunker, a 28-year-old mountaineer,
Yeah, he said, "I gotta
hailing
get
from
out of there. I
Seattle,
can't
had
stay over here no
unfortunately
more."
perished on Mount Rainier, falling into a crevasse. Matthew Bunker's story, while very fascinating and interesting, is also a
And had to move
tragic
all the way
one, and a
across the
true
country.
reminder
That's how
that
the step ahead him.
even with all the mysterious disappearances and things going on within Mount Rainier, you can never be too safe because anything can happen to anyone, no matter how inexperienced or experienced. Since an early age, Matthew's father, Joe Bunker, was a veteran and commercial pilot, and it's probably by no surprise that Matthew wanted to continue somewhat in his father's footsteps, becoming an avid outdoorsman, a lover of hiking and mountaineering, and also, like his father, serving in the military. After 5 years of service in the military, he left because he wanted to pursue being an avid explorer of the outdoors. The man went trail running, mountain biking, he scaled mountains all throughout the Pacific Northwest. This man was unstoppable, and unfortunately, Matthew Bunker did his very last hike on Friday, June 26th, right as he was descending Thumb Rock on Mount Rainier's Liberty Ridge route. And while he had been missing, unfortunately, they found Bunker's body in a crevasse on June 29th, only 3 days
sad.
after he had been reported missing. Elaine Ledreau, a park ranger who served at Mount Rainier National Park from 2005 to 2010, experienced some very eerie things to have happen to her one day on a patrol down the Paul Peak Trail. It was a beautiful spring morning in late May. There were no other hikers or people on that segment of trail that she was on this morning. It was roughly about 10 a.m. The Pacific Northwest sky broke away from early morning overcast to beautiful sunshine. The birds were chirping. She described everything being as perfect as it could be for this morning. As she's making her way down this trail, her nostrils become assaulted by this foul odor. And as she starts to recognize this odor as not just a stink, but that of death or a carcass, which, by the way, when you're in the wilderness, it's not uncommon for deer and other animals to die or to be feeding on carcasses. So she kind of just, at first, she just brushed it off, thinking that she's sure there's a reasonable explanation for this odor, but it was so strong and pungent, like it was within 10 feet of her. I mean, she could smell it. And that's when she realized, after something had caught her attention up by a tree nearby, that there was a doe, probably about 30 or so, 5 feet estimated, up on a tree. Now, this doe was actually slumped over this large branch, and it was literally as if something had grabbed it and ripped it open, with its entrails hanging all out and down the tree, as if it had been splattered. Elaine described the scene before her horrifying and gory, and she described that whatever had killed this doe, it looked like it had grabbed its back two legs and smacked it really hard up against a tree with so much force that its innards had splattered up against and actually dripped all the way down the tree and then continued to hang the rest of its body up on the tree branch. Immediately disturbed, disgusted, and startled by this newfound discovery,
It was a Bigfoot.
she then sensed danger. As she's holding her nose, observing what's right in front of her on this tree, she notices all the sounds around her. The beautiful morning birds chirping, the soft wind, came to silence. And instantly, the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end, and her skin begins to prickle. Because now that she knows this was not the kill of a bear or a mountain lion, and even more disturbing is that this kill is very fresh, probably no older than an hour or two at most. And that's when Elaine reports the feeling of being watched and observed like a mouse in a maze. And this bad feeling came over her, like she needed to leave now. Her entire body was screaming, "Get out." She didn't know how to describe the emotions and feelings that were coming into her body, but she just knew that she had to get back up the trail and get out of here now. Now, as she turns to go back up the trail, instantly, she begins noticing movement off in the tree line, probably about 20 or so yards away from her. Now, whatever it was, which she initially thought it was a person, but the more it began paralleling her in the tree line, she could hear just how heavy it was, but also noted that whatever or whoever it was not only extremely heavy, but they were trying to be sneaky and discreet, which made her even more nervous and frightened. So now Elaine's quickly picking up the pace,
I'm going
trying her
with
best
Bigfoot.
to get
That
back to
makes
the
the most
main
sense to
portion of
me.
the trail that Paul Peaks connects to. After making it back to the main ranger station, completely full of fright and fear, she confided in her supervisor about her fears and what she had experienced when he had just blankly looked at her and told her, yeah, we've been having a bit of a bear issue lately, just be careful. Completely ignoring anything else of her story that she had to add, and he would not hear anything more of it. Elaine thought his response was very out of character, very mono-expressive, and very strange because she was somewhat close to her supervisor. This was a guy who was very level-headed, very intellectual, very analytical of situations, and for him to give her a generic response like this, it made it seem like he was either trying to write it off or just push it down and ignore it, or perhaps he knew more about this kind of stuff and that this was not the first time that this was seen, spotted, or had occurred within the confines of the park. It's stories like Elaine's that really make you wonder what happened and why. But more importantly, I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below, so be sure to go ahead and do that. That was really good. And don't forget to smack that like
His
button.
videos are always really good. That's coming from What Lurks Beneath. If you like the video, go check his channel out. He has constant videos coming out. That was really good. I hope you guys enjoyed. That is all for that.